Chris Grier was active on Thursday afternoon because they made a pair of roster moves that I wanted to discuss on today's show. I am Nic Rohloff. This is Dolphins Today by Chat Sports. Those roster moves, just a simple signing and a simple release as a corresponding move. The player that they released was linebacker William Bradley King, and the player that they signed was quarterback Brett Gabbert, a UDFA out of Miami of Ohio. That is now the fourth QB added to the roster. And I find that very interesting. I don't know why they would add one, because when you think of the Dolphins roster and all of the players that need reps, I think at the top of that list would be Quinn Ewers, and I would argue Zach Wilson. A little surprised they added a fourth QB. We'll talk more about him here in a second. But make sure you are subscribed and make sure you have your notifications turned on, because we drop daily content, and whenever Dolphins news drops, we have you covered. So never miss a beat by subscribing to the channel. Only 14.1% of y'all have your notifications turned on. Let's get to 70K subs, but also make sure you're notified. Click that bell to all, not just personalized. All right, so let's introduce Brett Gabbert if you were not aware already. He is an older player, 24 years of age. He was in college for 6 seasons. That's what we call get a job, brother. Either way, his brother was former NFL and top pick Blaine Gabbert. And then the reason why we've known who he was because he was a UDFA that the Dolphins brought in to their rookie minicamp for a tryout. Not someone that they signed to a contract, which is why they obviously signed him today, but they brought him in and had him work with Quinn Ewers and these wide receivers, tight ends, running backs as the second quarterback at minicamp, and they clearly liked what they saw to a degree to keep him around. This is a player that I would not say was highly thought of at the collegiate level, but if you are someone who is a MAC truther, love that Midwestern, Northeast type of football, you might know who Brett Gabbert is because he was an absolute star over his long and illustrious career for the Red Hawks over in Ohio. Because he was first-team All-MAC this past season. He was on the third-team All-MAC twice in 21 and 23. And when he first stepped on the field and he started as a freshman for Miami of Ohio, he won Freshman of the Year award in 2019. So obviously, since he spent his entire life at the college in Miami of Ohio, you could see that he's got a lot of stats going on for him. He appeared in 53 games, has dealt with a lot of injuries as well. He had 10,800 passing yards, 80 touchdowns to 30 interceptions. He completed 58.5% of his passes. Like, I'm not going to act like he's a elite or a good quarterback. That's why he was a free agent until Thursday afternoon. But he is an interesting addition to the roster, and I'm going to have a full scouting report on him from our guy Tom Downey here, who went to Miami of Ohio, but also is our NFL draft scout at Chat Sports. But let me know before that, did you know who Brett Gabbert was? Type Y for yes, type N for no. I actually did, because if you played NCAA football 2025, Gabbert was a demon on Miami of Ohio. But let me know if you knew who he was. Let me know. All right, let's get to the scouting report on him. He is very, very undersized. He's about 5'11", so he is small. He's tough. He snapped his leg in half in October of 2023 with a compound fracture. My goodness. Really productive QB. Obviously, you saw the statistics, as well as being a starter as a true freshman. He's a really good thrower over the middle of the field, but doesn't always see that well in terms of over the middle, over his O-line, considering the fact he is 5'11". Sounds like he was projected to be a practice squad camp QB who would be a liability, apparently. That's what I say. Apparently, he's also not a statue, but he's not a runner. He's got the little in-between game. Tom did say he should fit fine in Mike McDaniel's offense because he's a good, accurate thrower when he has his mind made up and plants that back foot. Pretty good deep ball thrower as well. Dominated the MAC, but struggled versus better teams, a la when they played the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. So that's the full scouting report from Downey. Shout out to him. But he joins this QB depth chart room, right? He is that quarterback 4 behind Tua, Zach Wilson, Quinn Ewers, and then he is there as Brett Gabbert. I promise you, and I apologize in advance for all my viewers out there, I will accidentally say Blaine Gabbert when referring to Brett Gabbert. Not on this video, but in future videos, as well as probably when we get to the preseason, assuming he's still on the roster. But going back to that point I made earlier, that I was fascinated and surprised about the Dolphins signing Gabbert and adding a 4th QB to this roster, is because the last thing that I would have expected them to do is actually that. They have 2 developmental quarterbacks already on their roster. Now, last year they obviously carried 4 for most of the offseason with Tua, Skylar Thompson. They had Tim Boyle. They had Gavin Hardison, the UDFA from UTEP. I feel like there was another guy that was in the mix at one point, but I'm spacing on my mind. Either way, when you think of Quinn Ewers, he needs a lot of reps. And Zach Wilson, a very established backup quarterback, but also someone who needs to just get reps himself to hone in on his mechanics, his footwork, his accuracy, and when you transfer into the Mike McDaniel system, it's helpful to get more reps in. So with Wilson and Ewers, I would have liked to see those 2 dominate preseason snaps, get Tua in there for a drive or 2 in one preseason game, but the other 2 games basically, and the rest of that other game that Tua appeared in, let it be Ewers and Wilson. Wonder if Gabbert will take away from some of those snaps. I wouldn't be the biggest fan of that, but either way, a familiar name in terms of NFL notoriety. The Gabberts have another quarterback in the NFL. Now, on the flip side, obviously the Dolphins released a player. This one would be William Bradley King, and I want to just say bon voyage to William, who has been in the league since 2021. I typoed on this one. Spent from 2021 to 2024. He has not been in the league for 25 years. That's on me. Hands up. He joined the Dolphins and the practice squad at the August tenure of 2024, spent the entire year on the Dolphins practice squad, and then ultimately signed a futures contract with the Dolphins this January in 2025, played for Arkansas State for 4 seasons before transferring to Baylor for his final year in 2020 as a member of the college football program. But either way, I thought William Bradley King was going to have a chance to maybe compete for some, I almost said UDFA snaps. I'm all over the place here on a Thursday afternoon. But compete for special team snaps. To be honest, there's not much to say here. Like, our linebacker that has really done nothing in his career, hasn't played a defensive snap in an NFL football game since 2022 after his second season with Washington. Like, just nothing to say here. See ya, William. Appreciate you being a Dolphin for a year. Hopefully you find another organization to latch on with. We're going to round out the show with some other Dolphins news here in 1 second, but make sure you get your Dolphins hoodie. It's $40 off. Clearance. White hoodie. Palm trees. The Go Fins. Chatsports.com/Dolphins hoodie. That is the link. It's in the description and comments of today's video. Sizes are running from small to 2X, so get yours today. One more time. Chatsports.com/Dolphins hoodie. Let's round out the show with this. I think the Dolphins made a great decision, and it was not the fact that they signed Brett Gabbert and released William Bradley King. No, their preseason schedule was fully announced on Thursday afternoon, and there is another piece of news to come with that, but let's talk about the schedule first. Sunday, August 10th. That's going to be a rough game for me. My birthday's August 9th, so I'm going to get hammered the night before. Just kidding. Just a joke. It was a joke. Not really. And we'll see you bright and early on that Sunday morning. Then the following Saturday against the Lions on August 16th. And then they round out their preseason on August 23rd on a night session against the Jacksonville Jaguars. But the reason why we're talking about this is that the Dolphins practically announced that they will have joint practices with all 3 of these opponents prior to their preseason games. Unclear how many joint practices. Sometimes it's just 1 before a game on the weekend. Sometimes it's 2. Hopefully they do 2 joint practices like on Wednesday, Thursday before their weekend games with all 3 opponents, because I love this. And I said this the other day when Liam Cohen of Jacksonville announced that the Dolphins and Jags would be doing joint practices. I want it to happen with every time they do it. And I want it to be done until the end of eternity. Now, I will agree that maybe it's not the best decision to do it if you play that team in the regular season, but the Dolphins do not do that with these three. So why not test yourselves against some of the other top teams in the NFL? Because if we're going to be honest, those three preseason games are teams that are expected to be around 500 or in the playoffs. And I like that they're going to be able to test themselves early here. I really like the joint practices for Miami. Do you agree? Do you like the idea of practicing against another team prior to the preseason games, type L for like, or type D for don't like? To close out today's show, I want to talk about what I'm excited for in each joint practice and why I think it's a good idea. Well, it's one, you get to go against a physical defense in the Bears to start off your preseason campaign. I mean, the Bears had Grady Jarrett. They drafted Shamar Turner. They had other good defensive players like Montez Sweat, Jervon Dexter, Zach Pickens. They have Tyreek Stevenson, good young safeties, Jaquan Brisker, as well as Jalen Johnson. Like, they have a very good defense. So having Tua, Tyreek Hill, Waddle, this offensive line get to go against a pretty solid, what I would consider above average defense in the National Football League in your first preseason game, that will only test where you are at even stronger in the early parts, but also maybe prove to you how special you can be on the offensive end. The second preseason joint practice, though, is the one that I'm most excited for against the Detroit Lions, because one thing that we've talked about with Miami is improving their physicality. They tried to become a more physical football team by adding Zeke Biggers and Jordan Phillips, Kenneth Grant, James Daniels, Jonas Savinaya in the trenches this offseason. Equus Burkini on the outside as well. Well, Detroit has been the most physical football team alongside, I would say, the Philadelphia Eagles and Baltimore Ravens over the past couple of seasons as they've rose to the top of the NFC in terms of regular season records. Dan Campbell, obviously a physical football head coach, and as a team that wants to become more physical so they can play better football in November, December, and January, and hopefully into February at some point, I think having your team's physicality have a real test like this one against Detroit, who has an unbelievable defensive line and offensive line, is just an awesome, awesome test to see where you're at going into the season. But the second one, so if I rank the ones that I'm most excited for, it goes Detroit 1, here 2, and then Chicago 3. The reason why is because the Jags have elite weapons that you can really test your secondary against. The biggest concern and question mark on this roster, how is your secondary going to handle going up against Travis Hunter, Brian Thomas Jr., Liam Cohen calling the plays, and then obviously Trevor Lawrence at quarterback. Safety and corner, worst spots on the roster. Getting to go against the elite weapons that Jacksonville has will be an excellent kind of final test, as it is the last preseason game for Miami, to see if they are going to be able to have a competent secondary or if the concerns that we have now currently are going to carry over into week 1 and beyond in September. I'm excited to see these three storylines in the joint practices. To me, there's no downside. I mentioned it earlier. The only downside is if you ultimately play one of these teams in the regular season and you give away too much, but that is not the case here. So there's nothing that is going to hurt Miami in the long run. They're just going to get tested very well and see where they're at, learn from it, and hopefully get better. I talked about the joint practices as well as the Brett Gabbert signing earlier yesterday on Thursday, not Friday, yesterday, on my Twitter at Nic_Rohloff. So if you want more Dolphins content and don't want to wait for our YouTube videos, make sure you follow for more at Nic_Rohloff.